You've become an embarrassment to this family, Dad, a burden we can't afford anymore. My daughter said those words to me on the morning of my retirement party, the party she had organized herself, the one I thought was her way of finally saying thank you. And then she handed me a legal document I didn't understand and told me to sign it before the guests arrived. My name is Glen Whitmore. I spent 38 years as a structural engineer with the City of Edmonton, designing overpasses and transit corridors that 500,000 people drive across every single day without thinking twice. I retired at 67 with a modest pension, a house on Whitmore Drive I'd paid off in full, and what I believed was a close relationship with my daughter, my son-in-law, and my 2 grandchildren. I believed that right up until the moment I didn't. To understand how we got there, I have to go back to when my wife Carolyn passed away, 4 years before that morning. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless. She was gone in 11 weeks from diagnosis. My daughter, I'll call her by her name, Melissa, took her mother's death hard in ways I didn't fully recognize at the time. Grief does strange things to people. It either pulls them toward the ones they love, or it makes them look at those people and see only what they stand to lose. I know now which direction grief took Melissa. After Carolyn died, Melissa started coming around more. Weekly dinners at the house. She'd bring my son-in-law, Derek, and the grandkids, Owen and Paige. No, I'm sorry. I need different names. Those aren't right. My grandkids, Wyatt and June. Those dinners felt like healing. I cooked the same things Carolyn used to make. Roast chicken on Sundays, pea soup from scratch. I thought we were finding each other again after the shock of losing her. What I didn't see was that Derek had started paying very close attention to the house. He's in real estate. Has been since he was 25. He knows what things are worth in ways that other people don't. He walks into a room and his eyes go to the ceiling height and the original hardwood and the south-facing windows, not to the photographs on the walls or the quilt Carolyn made for the couch. A year after she died, he just mentioned, casually over coffee, that the Whitmore Drive neighborhood had appreciated significantly, that a house like mine, in that condition, on that lot, would probably list somewhere between $800 and $850. I laughed and said I had no intention of going anywhere. He smiled and said, of course not. Just thought I'd like to know. I thought about that conversation a lot afterward. I should have thought about it more at the time. The retirement party was Melissa's idea. She said she wanted to do something proper for me, something to mark 38 years of public service. She booked a private room at a restaurant in Glenora, invited my old colleagues from the city, my neighbor Ted, my friend from university, a man named Chuck Beaumont who I've known for 41 years. I was genuinely moved. I remember standing in my bedroom that Saturday morning, putting on the navy blazer Carolyn had bought me for our 35th anniversary, thinking that maybe the worst was behind us, that we'd come through the grief and landed somewhere solid. Melissa arrived 2 hours before the party to help me get ready. That was when she sat me down at the kitchen table, placed a manila envelope in front of me, and said what she said. I looked at her face. My daughter. The girl I taught to ride a bike in the parking lot of St. Albert Trail United Church. The teenager I drove to every swim meet from Red Deer to Fort McMurray. I looked at her face and I didn't recognize it. There was something arranged about her expression, like she'd practiced it, practiced being calm. What is this? I asked, touching the envelope. It's a power of attorney, Dad. Broad financial. Derek and I have spoken with a lawyer. Given your age and everything that happened with Mom, we think it makes sense to have these things formalized. I'm 67. I just retired. I'm not ill. It's precautionary. She pushed the envelope closer. The guests arrive at 6. I'd like to have this done before then. I opened the envelope. The document was already notarized. There was a line for my signature at the bottom of the 4th page. I flipped through it slowly. My hands were steadier than I expected. 38 years of reading engineering specifications had given me a reasonable eye for technical language, and what I was reading gave me that same feeling I get when a load calculation doesn't add up. Something was off in the framing. The authority granted wasn't narrow. It wasn't precautionary. It was comprehensive. Real property. Investment accounts. The ability to act on my behalf in all financial matters without my further consent. This is not a precautionary document, I said. Melissa's expression shifted, just slightly. Dad, you're overthinking. This gives you and Derek the authority to sell this house without asking me. Only in an emergency. It doesn't say that anywhere in here." She stood up from the table, and then she said something that I have replayed in my mind almost every day since. She said, "Dad, the truth is that you've been struggling since Mom died and you don't always see it clearly. Derek and I have been carrying a lot. Managing your appointments, checking in, worrying. We need to have some security too. We have children. We have a future to think about." I looked at her for a long moment, and this house is part of that future. She didn't answer, which was its own answer. I put the document back in the envelope and placed it on the table between us. "I won't be signing this tonight," I said, "or any other night." She left the kitchen. The party happened. I smiled the whole evening. I shook hands with my colleagues and accepted a plaque from the city. And I ate the salmon, and I gave a short speech about the Terwilligar footbridge and what it means to build something that lasts. Chuck Beaumont pulled me aside near the end of the night and said I seemed distracted. I told him I was fine. I was not fine. But I had learned something important in 38 years of structural engineering. You do not react to a stress point before you understand the full load distribution. You assess, you document, you plan. I started the next morning. The first call I made was to a lawyer, not the one Melissa and Derek had used, but a woman named Frances Okafor, who a colleague from the city had recommended years earlier for estate work. I described the document and what had happened. Frances was quiet for a moment and then said, "Mr. Whitmore, I want you to come in today if you can." I went in that afternoon. She reviewed a copy of the power of attorney I'd made before returning the original to Melissa's envelope, which I'd left on the table exactly where it was, unsigned. Frances explained what she was looking at. She used words like unusual latitude and concerning scope. She told me that while the document was probably legally valid on its face, the circumstances surrounding it, the timing, the pressure, the absence of independent legal counsel for me, were exactly the kind of thing courts look at carefully when determining whether a signature was obtained under duress. She also told me that in Alberta, a broad power of attorney granted to a family member, combined with that family member's clear financial interest in the grantor's primary asset, was a pattern she had seen before. She had seen where it led. "Do you have any evidence," she said carefully, "of specific financial activity that concerns you?" I told her about the comment Derek had made about the house's value. I told her he was in real estate. I told her that 2 months before the party, I had noticed that my online banking showed a login from a device I didn't recognize at 3 in the morning, from an IP address that wasn't mine. I had changed my password and thought little more of it at the time. Frances wrote everything down. Then she said, "I want you to do something that may feel uncomfortable. I want you to let things continue normally for now. Don't confront them. Don't let them know you've seen me. I want to do some checking, and I want you to document everything you observe." That night I sat at my desk, the same desk where I'd drafted engineering reports for nearly 4 decades, and I opened a fresh notebook. Date, time, observation. Same discipline I'd applied to every project. I wrote down everything I could remember from the past year, the comments about the house, the irregular login, the way Derek had started asking about my investment accounts at CIBC. "Just curious what kind of returns you're getting, Glenn. Might be worth talking to someone." The way Melissa had suggested 3 months ago that I might want to think about simplifying, her word, moving to something smaller, maybe a condo in the West End. I wrote it all down. Then I poured myself a scotch and went to bed. Over the next 6 weeks, Frances moved quietly. She contacted the Law Society to flag the document and the circumstances. She requested information through proper channels about the notary who had signed the power of attorney, a man who, it turned out, had also notarized 3 other documents for Derek's real estate business in the past 2 years. She hired a forensic accountant named David Park to examine any financial activity connected to my name that might have occurred without my knowledge. What David found took my breath away. Derek had submitted an inquiry to the Alberta Land Titles Office, requesting information about the encumbrances on my property, essentially asking whether the house had any claims against it before a potential sale. He'd done it 5 weeks before the party, before I had signed anything, before I had any idea what was coming. He'd been planning this longer than I'd realized. David also found that someone had contacted my investment advisor at CIBC in my name. by email, asking about the process for adding a co-signatory to my non-registered accounts. My advisor, a man named Ron Thibodeau, who has handled my portfolio for 14 years, had flagged the request as unusual and sent a verification email to my address. I had never received it, which told us that someone had also accessed my email. Francis called me on a Tuesday evening and said, "Glenn, what I have in front of me right now constitutes, at minimum, attempted financial fraud. There is also a potential case for unauthorized computer access. I want to be clear with you about your options." She walked me through them. I could go to the police immediately. I could confront Melissa and Derek directly. Or I could wait a little longer, gather more, and ensure that when this came to light, there was no ambiguity whatsoever about what they had tried to do. I thought about my grandchildren. Wyatt was 9. June was 6. Whatever happened next was going to change their lives in ways they were too young to understand. "How much more time do you need?" I asked Francis. 2, maybe 3 weeks. Then we wait. The hardest part of those weeks was the performance. Melissa called twice. I kept the conversations brief and warm the way I always had. Derek texted me once asking if I'd given any more thought to the power of attorney. I texted back that I was still reviewing it with a financial advisor and would circle back soon. I could feel, even through a text message, his impatience. What I didn't know during those weeks was that my neighbor Ted had noticed something. Ted Garvey has lived next door to me for 22 years. He's a retired RCMP officer, and he has that thing, that particular quality of quiet attention, that good investigators develop over a career. He'd seen an unfamiliar car parked in front of my house twice on evenings when I was out. He'd written down the plate number because that's what Ted does. He'd also seen Derek let himself into my backyard with a key he apparently had without my knowledge, walk around the perimeter, and take photographs. Ted knocked on my door on a Saturday morning and said, "Glenn, I don't know if this is any of my business, but..." He showed me the notes he'd made. The plate came back to a real estate photographer's vehicle registered to a company Derek had used on previous listings. Derek had brought a photographer to assess my home for a listing, without asking me, without telling me, while I was away at a conference in Calgary for 2 days. I called Frances that afternoon. She called it exactly what it was. The morning everything changed was a Thursday in late October, the kind of cold, clear day Edmonton does better than almost anywhere. Blue sky, frost on the ground, the air sharp enough to make you feel awake before you've had coffee. Francis had prepared a comprehensive file: David's forensic accounting report, the land titles inquiry, the CIBC email trail, Ted's notes and photographs, a statement from Ron Thibodeau, documentation of the unauthorized email access, and her own legal analysis. She had also, with my permission, made a formal referral to the Edmonton Police Service Economic Crimes Unit. She'd coordinated timing carefully. On that Thursday morning, an officer contacted Melissa and Derek separately, requesting their presence for a voluntary interview. Frances filed a formal complaint with the Law Society regarding the notary, and she sent a registered letter to Derek's real estate license board flagging the conduct. I was home when Melissa called. It was 11 in the morning. Her voice was a different thing than I'd heard before, stripped of the practiced calm, unsteady at the edges. "Dad, what have you done?" "I've done what you didn't expect me to do," I said. I paid attention. She started to say something about misunderstandings, about intentions, about how she had only been trying to protect me. I let her talk for a moment. Then I said, "Melissa, I love you. I have loved you since the moment I held you in the Peter Lougheed Hospital, and you opened your eyes and looked at me like you already knew who I was. That love is real and it doesn't go away. But what you and Derek attempted to do is also real, and it has consequences. I'd encourage you to speak honestly with the officer who's contacted you." I hung up. Chuck Beaumont came over that afternoon. I'd called him the previous week and told him everything, and he had said what good friends of 41 years say. He'd said nothing for a moment. Then, "What do you need me to do?" I'd asked him to write a statutory declaration about my character and mental capacity, something Francis could use if Melissa or Derek tried to claim I was confused or diminished. He'd gone one better and contacted 4 other friends from our years at the University of Alberta who had known me since we were 22 years old. All 4 wrote declarations. Chuck sat at my kitchen table, and we drank coffee and didn't talk about it much. At one point he said, "When did you first know?" I thought about it. I said I think I'd known something was wrong the day Derek made the comment about the house value 2 years earlier. I just hadn't been willing to see it clearly because seeing it meant seeing something about my daughter that I didn't want to see. He nodded. And now? Now I see it. Doesn't mean I stop loving her. The economic crimes investigation moved over the following months in the methodical, unglamorous way that such things do. There were interviews and document requests and waiting. Derek retained a defense lawyer. Melissa retained a separate one. The separation of their legal representation told Frances something about how their partnership was holding up under pressure. In February, I was sitting in Frances's office when she told me that Derek had formally been charged with unauthorized access to computer data, attempted fraud over $5,000, and breach of trust. The Real Estate Licensing Board had suspended his license pending the outcome. Melissa had not been charged. The evidence of her direct participation in the computer access and the financial fraud was murkier, though the power of attorney itself remained the subject of the Law Society complaint against the notary. "And the house?" I asked. "Unaffected. Fully in your name. No encumbrances." I sat back in the chair. Outside the window, downtown Edmonton was doing what Edmonton does in February, gray and cold and indifferent to human drama. I thought about the Quesnel Bridge, which I'd worked on in 1999, the steel trusses over the North Saskatchewan. I thought about what it takes to build something that holds. The hardest conversation happened in March. Melissa came to the house, called first, asked if she could come. I said yes. She sat in the same chair she'd sat in on the morning of the party, but this time her hands were in her lap and she wasn't handing me anything. She looked tired, thinner. The careful expression was gone. She said, "I don't know when it started. The way Derek talked about things, the house, your accounts. It started feeling like planning, and then it stopped feeling like anything wrong at all, which I know now means it had become very wrong." I asked her if she had loved Derek, or if she had loved what he offered. She cried when I asked that. I think because she didn't know the answer. I told her something I had been thinking about for months. I said, "Melissa, your mother and I worked for every dollar we had. We packed lunches. We drove used cars until they weren't worth repairing. We lived in that house for 34 years and we paid it off and it was ours. And it was going to be yours in time in the right way because that's how we raised you. I don't know what made you forget that. But I need you to remember it now." She left after 2 hours. We did not hug at the door. I watched her walk to her car from the front window, and I felt grief moving through me the way it did in the weeks after Carolyn died. Not sharp, but heavy, the kind that settles in your chest and changes the shape of things. June arrived with longer days and the yard coming back. Ted helped me put in a new garden along the south fence, something I'd been meaning to do for 3 years. We planted tomatoes and beans and a row of sunflowers. He didn't say much about what had happened. He didn't need to. The hearing for Derek took place in September. I testified for 40 minutes. Frances had prepared me for the defense lawyer's approach. He would try to suggest that the power of attorney was a normal estate planning document, that Derek's access to my property was authorized, that I was a confused older man who had misread intentions. The defense lawyer was thorough and not unkind, but every time he suggested confusion, I responded with specifics. Dates, account numbers, the exact wording of the land titles inquiry, Ron Thibodeau's email logs, Ted's photographs with timestamps. 38 years of reading technical documents does not leave you without a certain precision. The judge found Derek guilty on both primary counts. Sentencing was set for November. The range, Frances told me, was likely to include a period of probation, mandatory restitution for legal costs, and potentially a short custodial sentence given the premeditation involved. She thought the real estate license suspension would likely become permanent. I revised my will that October. Frances handled it. I left the house and the majority of my estate to a trust administered independently, with distributions to Wyatt and June on their 30th birthdays, not to Melissa directly, not yet, but with a provision that if she demonstrated, over 5 years, a genuine separation from Derek's influence and honest engagement in family counseling, a portion could be redirected to her. It was not punishment, it was structure, the same principle I'd applied to every bridge I ever designed. You build in the load capacity for what might be required, not just what you expect. I also made a donation of $20,000 to Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario and asked Francis to include a note requesting the funds be directed toward legal aid for seniors facing family-initiated financial fraud. It was a cause I had not thought about a year earlier and could not stop thinking about now. Wyatt and June come for dinner on the last Sunday of every month. Melissa brings them. She and I sit at the kitchen table after the kids have gone to watch television, and we drink tea and we talk carefully, the way people talk when they are trying to find their way back to something that was broken. It is slow. Some evenings it feels possible. Other evenings she leaves and I sit in the quiet and wonder. Chuck and I walk along the River Valley Trail every Saturday morning when the weather allows. Last November we walked through the first real snow of the year. Breath clouding, boots crunching on the path above the North Saskatchewan. He asked me how I was doing, actually doing. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said I was okay, that I was sleeping better than I had in years, that I had started sketching again, not engineering drawings, but small architectural studies, old buildings in the neighborhood, the kind of detailed observation work I'd loved before it became a job. That Wyatt had asked me last Sunday to show him how a suspension bridge works, and I had spent an hour at the kitchen table with paper and string and a small weight, and at the end of it, he had looked at me with that particular expression children have, when some clicks into place, and I had felt more like myself than I had in a very long time. Chuck said, "Carolyn would have handled this differently than you." I said, "She would have confronted Melissa about it the night of the party, and they would have cried together in the kitchen for 2 hours. And it probably would have worked, but it also might not have, and we would never have known for certain what was planned, and Derek would have tried again." Chuck was quiet for a while. Snow came off a spruce branch above us in a soft collapse. "You built something solid," he said finally. "I thought about the overpasses, the footbridge, the trusses over the North Saskatchewan holding up their load in every season for 25 years. That's what you do," I said. "You build for what has to be held, not just what you hope will hold." We walked the rest of the way in the good silence of old friends, and the river moved below us the way it always has, patient and cold and entirely indifferent to whether anyone is watching, carrying everything downstream regardless.